Yo, man, so like, if I talk all that shit to you then, why aren't you doing anything now when it's the same sort of stuff when I talk about Jamie Bulger having my dick chopped off? Like, it's merely typing, right? So why aren't I being fucked over for that? When you even recited the word fuck from me, which is stealing too, right? Because that was mine. So I don't know what you're doing, because I'm obviously like joking around with you. So you quite clearly saw it as valuable, because you wouldn't talk to me anything about like intellectual property that you fact that I can definitely vouch for the fact that your families would steal from you, right? Because you can't have brought intellectual property theft to the police, right? Because they don't exactly police that, because the retards, right? Is there any answer coming? I'll take that as a no, because this isn't authority speaking, right? It's like court evidence, but I mean, just keep it to yourself, you know? Like, just nothing, just complete retardation, right? Yeah, just the time and the really shit watch, I mean. Cheap, right? You're the police officer. What's a trap phone to you? Because I hear like, because the police gang's a thing, like your family say they're in the police gang, right? And what happens is, they don't call trappers slavers either, right? So what happens is what I hear is, all the trappers have like, iPhones and stuff, but when the police raid these houses and stuff, they leave and put a really cheap phone out. The police will say cheap because they know what cheap is, because the police officers outside, and they just put your mum in. And what I hear is that the police steal this phone and replace it with the iPhone that's actually inside this trap house, for example, and they just use this phone at home. It's only a rumour that I heard, because you don't really police the fact that drugs are like magic, right? Like, if you told kids that drugs were like magic, they wouldn't take them. But obviously your family's like taking MDMA because they're like saying it's not meth, right? Like, you have to reason it to me, because how would I report a police officer's kid that's taking class A drugs, like that I know that he's doing it because his dad's a police officer too, and that the police are all in on this very unfortunate predicament where they're obviously pieces of shit in this country, right? Like, how would I go about doing that? Is there any answer for it? Because obviously in court you've got none, but I've got nothing but evidence, right? Because people know how I speak, where it's actually very proof orientated, right? So obviously, like, you've got nothing, right? So you're fucked in court. So obviously, like, is there any way that I can get something from you? No, nothing for the interview we're doing right now. Absolutely fuck all. You won't even swear back at me. What's IPCC when you're swearing at me though? I mean, I'm allowed to do what I want, and according to you, I'm some mentally ill maniac, right? So why are you stealing my words though, right? That's my word. You're the fucker from Norwich who's all inbred and trying to shag his grandparents and that, right? I'm from Bradford, where we talk about like cool shit like Muslims and stuff and how they can't drink, and it's really cool. And obviously, like, we don't like the police because we know what they are with the youth. Like, I know about the police gangs, what your family say they're in. So obviously, like, they commit all the non-violent crimes. Kind of like Ronaldo, like, you can't vouch for the fact that Ronaldo hasn't been telling kids to do the same thing so that he can play football, right? Because the joke about slavery is that it's theft and enslavement, because so it doesn't actually need to be made illegal. So what it is that eyesight's a thing, so you can steal people's eyesight, and that's what slavery is, so it's fine. And obviously, like, so it's actually just worse, and I believe that the police are actually just a bunch of rapists that got together and just under the premise of the fact that slavery shouldn't be made illegal, and then it is illegal, so that people can't tell what's going on anymore. Obviously put it forward with the government, and here we are, as opposed to having like redcoats roaming around everywhere, which obviously would be awesome, right? Like, what's the point in actually having you when we could have like cool people? And obviously, like, since you're a man, I actually believe you use everything that you've been given by the government to like rape. I don't think, like, because obviously that's what you do, you of course accredit yourself with those sorts of things, right? So I think you should be strict. I think only like, and I think like, obviously you shouldn't have any of them. And obviously, since plainclothes police officers do exist, and there's precedent there with that being a thing, you can do that too. So everything you've got completely unnecessary, right? So like, who cares? So obviously, like, that's a thing. And well, since you won't respond, I mean, you'll have so much fun in court being the literate man you'll state to be, right? Like, you've got to admit you're not literate, right? Like, you've got just about as much downs as you could find in one of these places, right? Like, you might as well be in one. You're retarded. I mean, you don't know what university really is, right? Like, you'll even say to me you've been a force for decades, but you have nothing but mental retardation, right? You've never answered a maths question correctly, or even the idea of English didn't exist. You couldn't tell me what a book really is, you know? Like, how many pages does a book have? You couldn't even begin with the number 1. So that's your gone, right? That's the entire police thing gone. So I'm dealing with very illiterate men dragging people around to these places when I murder them in these rooms. And they don't like the word murder, but they'll tell me about, like, I'm not allowed to use other words. Weirdly, like, because I'm English, right? But in America, it's a very bad thing to do over there. Lots of freedom, but I'm English. So the problem with it is that I'm allowed to do, and that's soliciting oh yeah, can you tell me what the problem with solicitation of sex is, that girls don't know what it is? Can you riddle that to me? Please. It's actually a good one too, because the nature of solicitation of sex is that girls don't know what it is, right? You have to tell me. So you have to agree, right? Like, girls don't know what solicitation of sex is, and he's not helping, so obviously, like, he's endorsing rape, really, right? Like, come on. Like, what you're doing now is solicitation of sex. He's not necessary. You're a police officer. You can stand up and intimidate him as a police, but that's what you're doing right now, right? Like, that's illegal what you're doing. It's solicitation of sex. You're not allowed to do that. That's not part of your job. So you're committing crime, right? Like, admit it. You know what happens if your illiterate ass goes to court and you're just crucified like this? You're not Jesus, you dickhead. You're not a Jew. Like, you're no one. You're PC nonchalant talking about why he's not really a footballer, and the failed sports stars of the world are actually just thieves and the slavers, telling not your kids, because your kids are in the police gang, right? Like, the dad's a police officer, but just anyone's kids to stand on line so they can play football better, right? Like, that's what your kids do. So I mean, who cares, right? Like, no responses, but you won't solve the rapes that are going on. So I mean, aren't you a sweet one? Because no one says anything good about the police too, you know? Like, yeah, because you'll move too, but obviously that's just all theft, right? Because what I'm doing is not currency, so it's not paying you to do anything, right? So what you have to do is actually your job, which could exactly you coughed, it's exactly, you can ignore it all you want, but in court, you're dead, man. Can you please say your name, please? Or are you too illiterate for that? No response, because you couldn't tell me what illiterate means, right? Because it's like a very hard word to grasp if you catch my drift, because what about all the other words? So could you please say you're illiterate, please? Or is you too illiterate to say that? Because that would be the principle I'm saying, right? So what's literate then? So which one are we going with? You can repeat and steal like you just did, because what's the word illiterate, right? I'm not illiterate, I'm perfectly amazing, unlike you, right? So I mean, how's it going, you know? Any point? Just, you're going to do anything. Well, no, that's not mine. So, hey, can you respond to like the fact that girls don't know what solicitation of sex is? No, but you have to say that. You have to say that, don't you? Could you please admit that girls don't know what solicitation of sex is? What could you please let me know that girls don't know what solicitation of sex is? Because come on, that's the unpoliced crime. The police don't even say that, right? But what you're doing now is soliciting sex, because what you're doing is even ignoring me. Like, this isn't a benefit for you, otherwise you're pretending to be a strong man, aren't you? Like, or that's what you're doing. You're pretending, admit it. I'm sat here in someone else's chair being what I'd say is illegal. Admit this is illegal. Come on, I'm sat like this on the Queen's chair. Admit it's illegal. Come on, you're a police officer. Do your fucking job, you prick. Admit it, you're a police officer. I'm calling you cunt, a prick, everything in your fucking face, right? And in court, you're dead. You're no one, man. Admit what I'm doing is illegal. Exactly. Walk off like the cunt you really are. Because you know what? You're fucked in court, aren't you? So go die somewhere, man. Like, because I'm saying all this shit to you and it's nothing but nothing from you, innit? So you're screwed, aren't you? Like, look at you. I mean, you know, in Bradford, we call you white, right? Dirty cunt. And what are you really doing with your life by taking in, what is it, borderline minimum wage now? Look at me on the Queen's chair, not even policing it, are you? Look at this shit, all over it. I elaborated upon how it's to, of course, portray myself as being more casual. Obviously better for me, but that's all you got really. So I mean, out to you, right?